Kayla, and welcome to the Turning 30 podcast. So happy to have you here after we had to reschedule lots of times because of life and all the things. But yeah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. So happy to be here. So happy to finally chat with you. I feel we've been following each other for so long, so I'm just so excited to finally actually meet you virtually.
Yeah, I was thinking like this conversation's been such a long time coming, whether it was going to be in a podcast in front of all of my listeners or just a conversation with us, because I really believe that our mission and the content that we're sharing is so aligned to the point of I sometimes see your reels and I'm like, save, need to talk about that in my content. You know, everything that you post and share is really the turning 30 message of, you know, making friends in your 30s, doing things solo, anxiety, loneliness, all of the things that so many people aren't talking about online, and I feel responsibility to share about it. So I would love to hear your journey to talking about this kind of thing online.
Yeah. So I joke, I've been oversharing on the internet since 2011. I started as a fitness blogger back in the day when I was in college. And then that transitioned into the social media scheme of things. And when I was in my early 30s, so a few years ago now, I started to think about there's all these things that I am thinking and feeling, and no one is talking about this. Things like I live in New York City and the mass exodus of all your friends leaving, and thinking, wait, what? This is not what I was picturing. The making new friends part of your 30s, the feeling lonely when you thought you were not going to feel that way by now. So for me, it just started out of observing the things in myself and then putting it into words and putting it into social media posts, essentially figuring out how to craft it for the form of content that is Instagram and the ever changing world of that. And I started sharing from that place and was really amazed by the response to it and how people really related to it and felt the things that I was feeling, even though no one was necessarily talking about it.
And what do you think out of all those topics that you were sharing was the topic or the top topics that people were resonating with?
Number one was being single in your 30s, and I was single at the time. I no longer am, but talking about this weird, almost juxtaposition of being single in your 30s and loving so many aspects of your life, of loving where you live, loving the life you've created for yourself, loving your daily life, but also wanting to be in a relationship and having someone else there and wanting that part of your life, and kind of that weird pull I was feeling of how can I love my life and be so all about enjoying your own company, but also want to be in a relationship. And that was one of my first really viral reels, was talking about being single in your 30s. And then the other thing that has definitely been a recurring topic is that part of friendship in your 30s. How do you make friends in your 30s? How do you find your people in your 30s? How do you strengthen friendships? And then even just dealing with the loneliness on the other side of that as well.
Yeah, I love both of these topics, and let's dive into them one by one. But let's start with what you just said, the number one thing, which was, yeah, this very, I think you used the word polarizing, which I think is an amazing way to describe it, of wanting to meet somebody, but in the meantime, wanting to thrive, wanting to live a full life. And it's weird, isn't it, how they sometimes don't feel like they can come together, but of course they can. But for some reason, I think that there's a misconception around, if you are a single woman in your 30s, then, and you really do want to meet a life partner, then you're unhappy. And it's just so
Mm-hmm.
not true. And I
Yeah.
think that's exactly who I work with. That I would say that is my target audience, is women who they do want those things. You know, they want to have a family eventually, or they want to have a life partner and have that life. They're not rejecting that ideal, but in the meantime, they also aren't going to sit around and wait and just sit back and say, okay, well, until that happens, I won't be able to enjoy my life. I think it's amazing that you were speaking about that so openly, that feeling, because we don't hear enough voices talking about it.
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I sometimes just feel, why aren't people talking about this? So sometimes I will be the one to talk about it.
Yeah. And how did you find being single in your 30s? I know you've already given a few hints to the fact that you did embrace it and you did make the most of it, but can you talk a little bit about that part of your life? And I know for everyone listening, Kayla very recently got engaged. So congratulations.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. Thank
For
you.
everyone watching on video, she just showed her gorgeous ring, but really exciting. And I loved the Instagram series of your crazy proposal. Amazing story. But obviously this, I don't know, how long have you actually been with your fiance now?
So that's part of the complicated story is we are a second chance romance, as
Oh,
I
love
joke
that.
about it, as I'm a big romance reader. So we are one of my favorite tropes. And that actually relates to the whole being single in my 30s. We had been together for pretty much all of my 20s, from when I was 21 to 29.
Oh, wow.
And then we broke up as we had different views of where to go from there, and still deeply cared about each other. And we're still very much in love with each other, but just didn't know what that path forward looked like. So we broke up. I would say we were not very good at being broken up, is the truth of it. So we always kept in touch. And then, so I would have say I was technically single from 29 to about right before I turned 34 was when we like officially were like, we're moving forward, we're going for this and doing the thing. So that early 30s was really weird of I had been the girl in the relationship for all of my 20s, and it was just kind of this part of my life that I was like, cool, I don't really think about it. It's just there and not something I actively was thinking about. It was just a part of my life. And then suddenly to find myself 29 and single when so many of my friends were at that point getting married or getting more serious in their relationships. And then on top of that, pandemic life in New York City and all of those things, and just a whirlwind of turning 30 and thinking, oh, this all looks so different than what I thought it was going to, and even just how it looked for the previous couple of years.
Well, this is firstly, I knew that it was a second chance love story because I saw you sharing, but I didn't realize that you were together the whole of your 20s. In my
Yeah.
head, I think because you shared some pictures of you together on like summer camp from when you were younger. So I thought, oh, they like maybe were together when they were 17 or something. And then they just got back together in their 30s, they reconnected. What a crazy story that you were together for all of your 20s and broke up just as you were turning 30. A true turning 30 story. That's what I would say. And tell me, how was that to be suddenly single? And I know that you've probably found a lot of help through that. But yeah, like how, if you could just talk through a little bit about, I guess you mentioned all of your friends doing one thing and you were doing another, people leaving the city and you were staying. How did you cope with it?
It was definitely challenging, and this figuring out of it was truly all coinciding with each other, that I remember looking around being like, oh, I'm the only one that's not married. Meanwhile, I was the first of us in relationships and stuff. And it wasn't necessarily a bitterness, that obviously so happy for all of them and have had such different journeys to get where we are getting. For me, it was this zoom out of, okay, I have to make some changes. I have to rebuild my life. I have to really put an effort into making new friends, which is something I'm on the more introverted side, something that I'm not naturally great at necessarily, and something that I hadn't necessarily worked hard at in my 20s, as so many of my friends are people from growing up that moved to the city that was an hour north of where we all grew up. So for me, it was really like a zoom out moment of, okay, I need to work on myself a bit and just my comfort with myself and how I feel about this. And then also need to build up that life around me as well, so that I don't feel so isolated, so that I don't feel like I'm being left behind essentially.
And how did it affect your relationship with your friends, if you feel comfortable sharing and speaking about it? Because I can say from my own experience of my hometown friends were all married by the age of 30, pretty much all of them. They actually started having babies, I would say, around the age of 30, and they all got engaged 26, 27, and the weddings came straight after. And it was hard. It was really difficult because, you love these friends. These are friends that I know I'll have in my life forever. We're friends from pretty much when we were in daycare and at school, but at the same time we just had less and less in common. And my, at the time, journey of living in a different country and being single and dating again and doing all of the things, they just couldn't relate to it in the same way that I couldn't relate to them becoming mothers, and it was really far away from me. And you mentioned that you didn't feel bitter. I can say that I don't think I felt bitter, but there was definitely times of, quite second guessing and feeling, yeah, like you said, why am I left behind, or why does our lives look so different? How did it affect your friendships?
I feel really lucky in the sense that I don't think it affected the actual bond of us in our relationship. That I think for when I think of some of my closest friends, so much of our bond was always about us and being there for each other and not necessarily the guys in our life. And these are, I'm thinking of like two of the people that I've known, one since I was 5, the other since I was 12, and have been through all of these life stages together. For me, the challenge was really in the when they left the city and thinking I'm such a huge fan of Sex in the City and like grew up on that as my North Star for better or worse. And it was kind of, I joke, it was like required watching for moving to New York City when I was 18. And I remember seeing in that show that like all these women who were in their mid 30s still living in the city, still having that bond. And I always thought that I would have more of that. But when I looked around and was like, wait, they all left the city and I'm still here and I have zero interest in leaving the city. So it's not a matter of, oh, I want what they have, but just I want to still have those close ties. So I think for me, it really, if anything, shifted how I look at these friendships of, okay, so these people went from my everyday people that I see with regularly getting dinner together, of texting, oh, I'm in the area, what are you up to more of the we have to plan and figure out like a weekend together and stuff of that, and shifting who those people are in the everyday. And it looks different, but to me, I've had to really come to terms with that. It's not good or bad, it's just different. And it doesn't mean I love them any less or feel any less close with them. It's just that our friendships look a little bit different now. But as you said, these people are still so important to me and going to be here for the long run, I imagine.
Yeah, and I think it's really linked to just letting the friendship evolve into something new rather than really trying to cling on to what it used to be. And I think that's
Mm,
really, really important because friendships do change all the time, every life stage that you go through. And I think even maybe this is also something you've experienced, but I had and I still have really close single friends. And then when I met my partner and then went on to the next stages of life, those bonds also were a little bit affected. And again, like I still love all of my friends, but the friendship has a need to evolve. When I do this work with clients, I see that there's almost this resistance to the change and
mhm.
say, no, I just want it to be like it was before. And it can't be because as people, we're just forever evolving and our lives externally are also evolving. So unless you're very, very lucky and it happens to be that your closest friends live exactly the same path as you and do things exactly the same time as you, you're probably going to have these like gaps in time
Mhm.
where you are on a different path.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, it is really true. And so you mentioned talking, and I know that you've shared a lot about loneliness and how did that affect you? And I guess you speak a lot in your content about living in the city because you live in New York, and that's like I guess a lot of your personality and your branding is about specifically about New York. But I think that a lot of the listeners will resonate to the living alone in a city, no matter where it is in the world. So can you share a little bit of your journey with loneliness? And I guess what I really want to dive into is for anybody listening who does struggle with loneliness, like how can they help themselves?
hmm So I lived alone during the whole first part of my relationship with my now fiance. So I was living alone from I think 20 until he just moved in this year, so 34. So 14 years living alone. And in many ways I loved living alone. I am someone who really enjoys my alone time, introvert, all that stuff. But there is that it can be lonely and you have to make the effort to see people because they're not just there automatically at your home. And for me, a big thing that I had to do, especially after the breakup of living alone and also being single for that first long stretch, was really working on that relationship with myself and creating little rituals with myself that I could look forward to that didn't rely on someone else and didn't hinge on someone else to make this thing that I want to do happen. So, for example, I started picking up brunch from my favorite spot on Saturdays. And I miss that place so much because my partner and I used to go there all the time on Saturdays, and I love their food and it's a great place. And I was like, wait, I can still keep a part of this ritual alive because I still want to eat that tasty food, but I can make it my own and make it its own special thing. And finding other ways to do that. What is it that I like to do alone? For me at that point, I don't think it's a coincidence that I got really into reading shortly after going through the breakup and finding this solo activity that I love doing on my own. And also this mindset shift. I know a friend of mine has always reminded me that alone does not have to mean lonely, and it can be simply that I am alone, but that doesn't need to also mean I am lonely. And yes, sometimes it is lonely as well, but how can I find more of that joy in the alone and kind of bask in it of how amazing it is that I get to do what I want when I want. I get to follow my intuition. I get to explore things that I'm excited about, go on weird wormholes on YouTube for 2 hours on a Saturday night that like no one else cares about, but I'm deeply into. And finding those things and just really looking at it as it doesn't have to be lonely and it can just be enjoying my solo time.
Yeah, I really like that. And I do think it is a mindset shift. For me, when I lived alone after my breakup, and it was the first time I'd ever lived alone before, so it was a bit of a different situation for you. I went through a breakup at 33, and before that, I had been living with roommates. So I never actually lived alone, and I absolutely loved living alone to the point where I was like, oh, I absolutely need to find somebody to marry who wants to also live alone, and we could like live next door to each other or something. That would be
The
ideal.
secret dream, yes.
The secret dream, exactly. Or like a huge house that has like a different wing, you know, like I'll have my wing, he'll have his wing. But yeah, sadly that's not come true just yet. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed living alone. But there were certain occasions, let's say, or certain times of the week where I did feel really sad for myself that I was by myself, not by choice at those times. So that would be like holiday days, or like for me, it was always a Friday night. Like I just had this thing about not wanting to be alone on a Friday night. And it also like got into this time of making it worse for myself because in my head, it was like the worst thing in the world. Like I have to spend Friday nights alone and all my friends are together or they're with their families and it's just me. And I also, exactly when this happened was exactly the time of the pandemic. So we were in lockdown anyway. And actually, what shifted and what happened that made a huge difference was that I started to say, no matter what, on Friday night, I'm going to be alone. So it wasn't
Yes.
like I'm going to try to make plans with different people. And then if they don't work out, oh, like boo hoo, woe is me, I have to sit and stay in. It was like, no, my Friday nights are the Friday night where I cook myself a really nice meal and I watch probably Sex in the City or something on TV and really just enjoy and you use the word bask, like bask in that time. And that was a huge change for me because
Mm.
it takes away that the graspy energy, you know, that feeling, and I'm sure it's familiar to you and for those listening, that when you really want to do something and then you're like looking through your phone and you're like messaging different people and it's almost like the universe wants you to not see other people because everyone is busy and you're like, okay, now I have to
Yep.
actually be by myself. But yeah, like something really switched in me when I just really started to own it and say, okay, I'm gonna like have this ritual. I love that word. And if I'm alone, I'm alone. And then it just felt more easy.
Yeah, I love that as thinking of it more as the default as opposed to a consolation prize, essentially.
Yeah, and I have to say now, ironically, tomorrow morning, I'm going on my first solo. I don't even want to call it a trip because it's literally one night. My first solo date with myself that's going to last 1.5 days and one night. And it's the first time I've been away from my son since he was born a year ago. And I'm so excited because
Yeah.
it's so crazy how life can just shift and flip. So before it was like that was just an expansive time being alone and traveling, doing solo dates, doing all this stuff by myself. And now I've been waiting for the whole week to just go on this little mini solo adventure. So I do have a message for my past self of enjoy this, just enjoy
Yeah.
it, you know, really, because I think I didn't appreciate it enough at the time.
It's so funny. I've experienced such a similar thing with my partner moving in, and I love him, and I think he is like the best roommate I could ask for, and very much understands how I love my alone time. I love my space. But now there's something like a little exciting about when it's like, oh, he's away on a Friday night. I'm just gonna like do whatever I feel like doing and go back to being my like living alone self. And that was something I did for 14 years, and yet now it feels like this little treat when it comes up. So it really is so funny how we don't always appreciate what we have until it
until
totally
it's gone.
flips.
But that was actually leads really nicely onto what was going to be my next question was how did you transition from 14 years of living alone to then having your partner move in? And yeah, like you said, he's a roommate. How it's
Mhm.
having someone in your space. How was that for you?
It's been so much better than I thought it was going to be. And he's so funny. He's like, I knew it was going to be fine. You were the one that was so worried about it. And the way I feel very lucky that we had obviously had so much history together and overall been together for so long and known each other for so long. So know each other really well and just really know what the other person needs and not taking it personally if like last night I was at the end of a book that I'm reading and it was really good and I was like, I'm gonna be honest, I just want to read this book tonight and like you do your own thing. And he was like, cool, I'm gonna go in the other room and watch stuff and play video games or whatever. And just really being communicative about what it is that either of us needs at any given moment of do you need your alone time? Are you open to doing something together? And not being offended if the other person just like really needs their alone time, knowing that it's not a reflection of me, but more so just what they need.
Mm.
And I think for both of us, it's definitely been me working on communicating what I need more because living alone, I didn't have to tell anyone what I needed. I just did what I needed.
Mm.
And just being open with him about if there's nights when it's like, no, I like really just need to do my own thing versus nights where it's like, oh no, let's like play a game or watch something together. And overall, we talked about it definitely a decent amount before we moved in together. And he knows how important a sense of independence is to me and just doing my own thing. So just making sure that I'm still getting enough of that to like get my craving for it. But then for me also, it's been a shift of, oh, like, yes, I love that. And I can also love living with him and creating our own little rituals and things that we do. And I think for me, I possibly had thought beforehand that it was like one or the other. Either you love living alone or you love living with your partner, and it can't be both necessarily. That one is going to be the good and the other is going to be the like, I don't really like this, but it just is. And I was like, I really realized that I love living alone and I'm so grateful for all that time. But I've also really loved living with him and having that extra time together and creating our own little rituals. He cooks for me, which is fabulous as I'm not a very adventurous cook. And realizing, like, oh, I was so scared, but I can also enjoy this
Yeah.
as well. And really being open to that.
But you just tapped into something that I think is really important for anybody who is living alone right now. And I guess feels, maybe you can share a little bit about this, but feels that, oh, why do I have to live alone? And it's so much harder to live alone. I think that when you actually do eventually meet somebody, it's such almost like a life hack to have lived alone because you know how to be by yourself. And I
Mm-hmm.
really think that is something for me that is actually something I'm just so proud of is that I did end up living alone and I had to do loads of stuff for myself and I moved house 3 times completely by myself and I learned how to put shelves up and clean things and do things that I didn't necessarily do before because my
Mm-hmm.
ex would just do it for me or when I was living with roommates they would do it instead. And I feel like there's something really special about learning. And even if you feel like, oh, why me? Like, I don't want to do this. I'm so happy I did. And also, I genuinely think it makes for a better relationship. And I think that you were
Mm-hmm.
just sharing there of those examples, how you can just turn around and say, oh, no, like, I want to be by myself tonight and have that communication and that understanding that you're just two separate people who are choosing to live together is so important. And I find that as well in my relationship. I think me and my partner are actually a little bit too independent. Like we have to make quality time. We're like, okay, and we both work a lot in the evenings because of the time zones here, and we're it can be like a week go by and I'm like, oh, I actually haven't seen you ever past 8 p.m. because we're both doing our own thing. So yeah, like but I do really value what I was saying about how living alone gave me so much grit and gave me so
Hmm.
much confidence as a woman in my 30s that I've taken forward now. Do you feel the same? And did you ever have any of those feelings, I guess, of resentment? Because I think a lot of my community have, understandably so, that feeling of life being a lot more expensive as a single person
Hmm.
living alone and paying one rent and paying one set of bills and one food
Hmm.
shop, because obviously life's set up for couples. So yeah, I would love to hear what you think of that.
Totally. It's so interesting. You sharing that reminded me of a few people in my life that were in very serious relationships, either during that were living with roommates or living with their partner, broke up with that person, had to live alone, and then ended up in the next relationship that ended up being getting married. And that transition for them was so different of after they did live alone and being like, oh, I actually really like this, and that they were so pleasantly surprised. So it's really funny how that does turn out that way. As far as the living alone and kind of resentment, I do feel really lucky that I was so privileged to be able to live alone for that long and be able to afford it and live comfortably enough alone. I think for me, some of the resentment was more towards just the like ease of making plans and even wanting to go on certain trips and not having the person to go on that trip with more so. I mean, I just went on a solo trip even now that I am in the relationship because my partner couldn't make it work and realizing like, oh, you can do that, but it is more expensive. That just is the reality of it. So I think I felt it to some extent, but I also will acknowledge that I felt really lucky that I was able to do that and didn't have to think too much about it. But it is true. It's so much more expensive to not have that other person to split costs with.
Yeah, it is really expensive because life is set up, as in society is set up to celebrate families and couples. But I agree and resonate with what you said. I was in a bit of a strange position where when I had to go out and live alone, I couldn't afford it. But I was
Hmm.
so adamant that I was not going to get a roommate. So I just made it work.
Yeah.
And I think at the time there was maybe that underlying feeling of like, oh, this is so annoying. Why don't I have all the things that I wanted? But then it made me really step up and go all in on my business and end up I had to live alone. And then it was like after 6 months, I became fully booked. And I know that it was because of that. It was because it was like,
Hmm.
this is going to work because I
Yeah.
just was adamant, like, I'm 33, I'm not going to live with roommates. Not that there was anything wrong with that, but I just really wanted to make the situation for myself where I could enjoy my time alone and build a sanctuary,
Yeah.
which is actually, I think that's what I loved about your content. And I think you shared a lot about that. You made the space so you and
Hmm.
so special. And I really recommend to everyone who's doing that, whether you live alone or you're with roommates, your actual living space, your room, your house. Yeah, like make it yours, make it something like special. And that's when I moved into the first place I lived in after the breakup. I used to open the door when I came home and it wasn't a fancy apartment or anything, but it just really felt like, oh, I just loved it there.
Hmm. I think that's such a good part of it is finding those ways to make your space feel like sanctuary is really the perfect word for it, even if it is just your bedroom or something. And I think that does help with the whole living alone thing of making your space your safe space, essentially.
Yeah, totally. And you just mentioned there about going on a solo trip. So yeah, can you share a little bit about that? Because I love the fact that you did that, even though maybe people were like, where's your partner? And why is he not coming with you? And I know that you also, before you were with him, you also traveled solo. I remember seeing some of your trips and everything. And I'm obviously a huge advocate for doing these things. So yeah, can you tell us a little bit about what that was like to, I guess, go on like a honeymoon holiday, but it
On
wasn't a
my own.
honeymoon?
Yes. So I had gone to Punta Cana to like an all-inclusive resort there on my own for I think it was 5 nights total. And for me, I just quit my job. So I was really craving a true reset vacation. And for me, one of the places I typically go is I travel to LA a lot. My best friend is there. And while I love going to LA and consider it my home away from home, it's not a very relaxing trip, is just the truth of it, because I'm there visiting my best friend. He usually ends up creating this like incredible itinerary for me of activities every night and things to go do, stuff to do. I feel like I'm trying to see so many people when I'm there that when I get home, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. And I knew I needed a like true break. I was just craving to like sit on a beach and read for 6 days essentially. That was all I wanted. And I asked around to a couple friends and no one could make it work as far as the timing or the cost. My partner's a teacher, so he has limited vacation time and also financially it just didn't make sense for him right now. And the more I thought about it, I was like, I'm just going to do it on my own. That I have really become such a believer that I would rather do it on my own than not do it. I would also rather do it on my own than do it with someone that I won't enjoy the experience with them, is the truth of it. And I think that's can be seen as maybe a little bit rude, but to me, I'm just so protective of this is what I want this trip to be. This is the energy I want. And I don't want to like bring someone into it that I just am saying, oh, come with me just because I want someone there. So I did a little bit of research, spent a lot of time looking for like safety stuff and searching on TripAdvisor for solo, female, safe at various resorts, and then ended up booking the trip and going. And I have no regrets. It was phenomenal. I was so happy. I was just like blissed out there. I read literally a book a day every day and was so content. And I remember I'd asked my partner if, not if he resented it, but like, did he think it was weird? And he was just kind of like, no, like, that's like, you do your own thing. Like, I'm not surprised. And like, if you want to do something, you're just going to do it. And it's funny, online, obviously, like, once the posts went out to people beyond my audience, some people are so weird about how they view that stuff of like, oh, she's obviously cheating. And I remember like showing these comments to, he was my boyfriend at that point, and he was like, that didn't even cross my mind. Cause like, he was like, I know you. You didn't talk to anyone the whole time you were like, that was the joke of like, my mom at the end of the trip was like, did you talk to anyone? Or were you just like reading your book on your own the whole week? Because that's really more my personality. And for me, it was actually really illuminating of, oh, this is something I can do and will continue to do. And when we got back into our relationship, that was something I was really scared of. It was losing that independence and doing the things on my own. And going on that trip was really empowering that, oh no, this is something I can do. And why not? There's no reason that I'm a quote unquote bad person for not doing this with my partner. This was a trip that I wanted to take and it worked for me. So I did it. And I've only done one other full solo trip, and that was to London specifically for a concert. So that was a slightly different experience in that there was a lot more thinking every day about what am I going to do and a lot more navigating. And I really liked that as well. And I think for me, the big realization was that trip was really not much different than my everyday life in New York City. That I was just was like, oh, like I'm just alone in a different city and kind of doing the same thing I typically do, just without having to do my job today.
Yeah.
And it was also empowering and something I do want to do again. I'm trying to figure that out. The challenge of it is that it is more expensive, is I feel like where the thing that stops me and I think stops many people, rightfully so.
I think it's a really important point of when you're in a relationship that you don't have to compromise the things
Mm-hmm.
that you actually really want to do. And if that includes going to a specific holiday or a specific country or a specific, I don't know, concert or something, like the fact that you said, I wasn't just going to sit and wait and not go, or go with somebody who I didn't want to go with. It's better to do it alone. But it's so interesting to me, these trolls on the internet who would actually care that
They're
you went on
so
holiday
weird.
by yourself.
They're so
Like,
weird. The
so,
internet's
so,
gonna internet.
yeah, it's really very much so. So, what advice would you give to someone? And I would say there are lots of women who are listening to this who are living alone, are single, they maybe feel distant from their friends, and they maybe feel the loneliness part. What advice would you give based on your own story over the last 5 years that would help them?
Mhm. One, know that you're not alone. And I think there's something good to be reminded of that, that sometimes you feel like you're the only one who feels that way. But remember, there are so many people out there that are feeling exactly what you are feeling. I think that's why accounts like yours are so important to validate that and make people know that, oh, I'm not the only one, because sometimes it can feel that way, especially if it seems no one in your immediate circle is feeling those things. As I was saying earlier, those little rituals are really so important. So zoom out and think about like what it is that you love doing on your own and what is it that you can turn into this special thing. Like for me, I've had my tradition of Sushi Thursday since I think like I was in my early 20s at that point. So had nothing to do with my relationship. And every Thursday I get sushi from my favorite spot. I started as this idea to essentially curb my very expensive sushi habit and be like, nope, instead of ordering it every single night, you get one night a week. And, but it became this whole ritual with myself of like waking up on Thursday being like, oh my God, I'm so hyped. I'm going to get the good sushi tonight. And at that point, my partner and I were long distance, like semi long distance. He was living in our hometown. And it didn't matter that like he wasn't there to have the sushi with me. I was getting the sushi on my own. It's still something I do. So I think finding like what is your Sushi Thursday, a ritual that you can have with yourself that you look forward to. I know people who do like whether it's like Real Housewives on Friday that like, yep, you watch Real Housewives on Friday, you get pizza from your favorite place, maybe you take a bath. Like what is that special thing that you do with yourself and how can you make it this celebration and this thing you look forward to, even if other people aren't creating that for you. I think so often we like wait for other people to create rituals with them when like we can just do that with ourselves. Like we can create little silly things. Like I came up with the idea of Sushi Thursday. It's really not revolutionary. There's no rhyme or reason for it except that was the day I decided. So find what your version of that is and something to look forward to on a specific day of the week or after you do a specific activity that makes you feel like you are celebrating that time with yourself and that it doesn't rely on someone else to create that specialness.
You mentioned as well before, I just want to squeeze in this last topic before we finish because I forgot to ask it to you earlier about making new friends. So, I know that you were navigating this new chapter when it was after the breakup was in lockdown. So potentially wasn't really the time to make new friends, but have you had experience meeting new people in your 30s and how has that looked for you? Because I think that's a question that I get asked, and I'm sure you do as well, time and
Mm-hmm.
time again of, okay, how can I meet new people? Where are the other women hanging out?
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. I really made it a focus of mine at one point, both deepening existing relationships with the people that were still in the city and then branching out to new people, which for me is on paper my worst nightmare as an introvert that I'm not going to go up to and introduce people. But now that I like think about my life in my 30s, I'm kind of amazed at how many of the people I would consider my really close friends are people that either I met in my 30s or became close with in my 30s. And so much of it is one, this openness to it of being like, okay, they're not going to be your best friend off the bat, rarely, but do you enjoy your time with them whatsoever? Is there opportunity for that to build? Like when I think of one of my best friends now, he and I like kind of knew each other. He moved to New York City from LA with the other best friend. And we like started hanging out one on one and we like definitely like got along and whatnot. But like as time went on, that relationship deepened and deepened and deepened and got to the point of me being like, oh, like you are one of my best friends, but it didn't happen at that first brunch together. We weren't immediately besties. And I had a similar experience. I joined a new gym it's been almost 2 years now, and it's very focused on community, which is definitely a special thing that it exists. And I remember the first day, I was like, I know it's really focused on community, but like, I don't think these are my people. Like, a lot of them were a lot younger than me. I was just like, I don't know if I relate to them. And then as the time went on and we would get coffee after the workout classes and I got to know them, I was like, oh my God, I love these people. Like, it doesn't matter that they're younger than me. They're so cool. They're so funny. They have a lot of the same interests as me. And like, one of the people has become one of my very close friends in the city. And I think that openness makes such a difference and reminding yourself that friendship is not as instant as maybe we remember from our childhood. Friendship in your 30s is more of a slow build sometimes of you spend time together and then you spend a little more time together and then suddenly you realize that you feel really close to this person. So going in with that openness of they don't have to be your best friend right off the bat, but is that someone that you enjoy their company and you would want to hang out with again, and make that effort so that it can bloom into so much more.
I'm so happy I asked that question, because that was such an amazing and spot on answer to it in terms of how to make friends in your 30s, because I really feel that it is difficult to have that instant spark. And sometimes if we don't have an instant spark, we can, like you said, just say, okay, it's not the right people, it's not the right person for me. And how amazing that what you just said about this, seeing the people in the gym, and you originally said no, and then it just turned out that they were your people. And also to just let go of any expectations or judgments about people because of their age. The truth is that when you are in your 30s meeting new people for the first time, you might connect with somebody who's much older than you or much younger than you, and to not care about it. And I can say that, you know, when I was living in the city, I had friends from all different ages, and I was, in fact, out of all my closest friends, I was one of the oldest. And I definitely have still closest friends who are 5-6 years younger than me, and really it makes absolutely no difference at all to the fact that once you get past a certain age, it's like, you know, and this also applies with dating, by the way, to anyone listening. Like, you know, it's the same thing. I did a dating podcast last week, and we were talking about this, the slow burn in dating, giving things a chance, not trying to, you know, focus on the spark. So it's the same with friendships as well.
Yeah. Say, I imagine I will admit I do not have much of any experience with actual dating, but I've been told it's very similar as far as that openness that you have to go in with, and kind of not expecting that instant spark and love, essentially.
Yeah. And the openness point I think that you made is brilliant. Okay, amazing. So where can my listeners find you if they're not already following you? I feel like they might be, because we're so aligned. But for those who aren't and they want to see more of your content and what you are currently doing, where can they see you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram. It's at Kayla Kleinman, my name. That's definitely my main hub of where I spend most of my time. And then I also have a YouTube channel and a Substack, which are both under my name as well.
Amazing. I'll link everything in the show notes. And thank you so much, Kayla. I'm so happy we finally got the chance to record this, and I'll see everybody else on the podcast next.